It's easy to say woo pig after you've been to back second weekends in the NCAA tournament, have been the last SEC team standing for 3 years in a row, beaten 2 number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament in consecutive years, have had 4 first-round draft picks in 4 years, 20-plus wins in 4 straight seasons, and have finished in the top 5 of the SEC in 2 of the last 3 years. It's been Hog Heaven on the Hill under Coach Musselman. Now Arkansas looks to have a very deep, talented, and experienced team coming into the season with transfers, fresh faces, and returning talent. But some commentators think this might be a step back year for the Hogs. What are you thinking, David?
So, yeah, there's some thoughts out there that maybe this is a step back year, but I think a lot of that comes from like last season not living up necessarily to the exact expectations, but injuries absolutely plagued the Hogs last season. So I think that's what's leaving a lot of taste in a lot of commentators out there's mouth. When you look at this team, it looks really good. It looks really fun. But I will say, while I clearly am an Arkansas Razorback fan, this is not the team in the SEC that I'm the most excited to talk about. That'll be another episode down the line, but I am extremely excited to talk about the Hogs today. So yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little Razorbacks.
Well, today we're going to be talking with Caleb Sheppard of Woo Pig Weekly to get his thoughts on the Hogs this year. Let's talk about the boys of Bud today on the Hoops Southbound Show.
The Tennessee Volunteers are going to the Sweet 16.
Florida takes its place in history. Back to back and unforgettable.
Three-pointer on the way, no good. Pulls with the dunk at the buzzer. It goes and Arkansas wins.
And the Kentucky coronation is complete.
All right, we want to welcome into the show Caleb of Woo Pig Weekly. Caleb, how's it going today?
Going pretty good. Got to move past what happened this weekend in football, but we're not going to talk about this as a basketball show, which has a lot of optimism going into this season.
Let's please not talk about football right now.
It still hurts.
It's
like a fresh wound. We'll get there. We'll get there, though. All right. As you said, Caleb, we've got some high hopes for this Hogs team on the Hill this year. So if you could kind of sum up what you're thinking, just a general overview of the Hogs for this season before we get started. What are kind of your thoughts on this team so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of excitement for good reason. You got a great returning player in Trevor in Brazil that, really had a lot of fans excited last year before he got hurt. And, he's excited to get back. He's worked hard. And then not only that, but you've also got a lot of, exciting incoming players as well. Not only your freshmen, but your experienced players that Muss grabbed in the transfer portal.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked a lot about experience when it comes to March. And I think a lot of this Hogs team, the experience is going to pay off for sure.
Very experienced team. Like, what are we talking about? 35 years of experience on this team overall. It's a good, deep team that's got a lot of experience at the Division I level. It's something that you definitely like to see when you're trying to make a bid for a deep run in March.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, Caleb, we've kind of started a little game here on the Hoops Southbound Show. We're going to call it Buy or BS. We're going to give you kind of a little scenario here, and you tell us if you're buying it or you think it might be BS. Me and David are going to kind of go back and forth giving you some prompts, but I'll start you off with the first one. Khalif Battle will make first team All SEC this season.
With what I've seen from him, his clips, and coming into this fall with some excitement, I'm going to buy on that. I really think he's going to come in and contribute to this team. He had a great resume coming in from Temple. I think he's going to fit well into this Musselman system and honestly probably thrive on that, being a very similar guard to guards we've had in the past, where he can shoot the three, but he can also really drive to the basket and, get in there and get buckets and get the fouls.
I like the take. Honestly, Caleb, I agree with you. He's the shooter that Arkansas has been looking for quite a bit. They've been needing a shooter for the last several seasons under Musselman to really take this team to the next level. He's kind of that guy, and he did a lot of his points productions last season coming off the bench. So he's a very talented player. I like the take. We'll see if he does make first team All SEC. That's quite the challenge to achieve, but I think he's a huge piece for this Razorbacks team. Mm-hmm. All right, I'll hit the next one, Caleb. Arkansas has the most depth in the SEC this season.
That's another one that I realistically will buy looking at, across the board, other teams, Bama lost a lot. Some of these other schools lost a lot. Muss really had a big haul in the portal, plus with some guys returning. I easily think we can have an A and B team easily with this roster that Muss has assembled this year, not only from a guard standpoint, but from a big standpoint as well. He's got a great combination of depth and size throughout this entire roster, looking at it up and down from experienced guards, but also talented incoming freshmen as well. That I think is a great mix for this roster that could lead to success in the SEC and in the NCAA tournament.
Definitely. So, Caleb, touching on a player here you brought up, kind of starting us off, Trevin Brazile will be a first-round draft pick in the NBA draft this season.
With Muss's track record, I want to buy on that, but part of me wants to sell right now just because I want to see how he recovers from his injury. Does he come out and have that same level of production that he had last year before the injury? If that is the case, 100%. But until I can see that he's come out and fully recovered and gets back to his old self, I'm going to sell on that right now.
I think that's probably cautious optimism. I'm with you on that thought process. I know that USA Today has already said that they think Trevin Brazile will be a first-round draft pick, but I can understand wanting to see how he recovers from injury. I think that's a great point. All right, next prompt. This is the best team Eric Musselman has assembled in his time at Arkansas.
Oh, that's a tough one. Hitting me with a tough question. He's had some really great teams. For this squad, I might actually buy that with just from the depth standpoint that we've got and the experienced guards here. He's had a combination of teams when he's come in and had a lot of experience, but not a lot of youth. To switch it to last year, a lot of youth on this team and, not as much experience, but I like the depth across the board. And this could be one of the deepest teams Muss has had while in his tenure here at Arkansas.
Yeah, for sure. Our last one, it's a little bit of a trick question for me, but I'll go ahead and give it to you. Arkansas will be a 7 to 10 seed in the NCAA tournament again this year. I'm
going to sell on that one because I think they're going to be higher. I think they can come in and get a higher seed, a top 4 seed, I think is realistic for this team. That's, coming in with optimism and expectations. We've got a lot to see when they hit the floor and, how these guys gel together. I think that's a large piece when you run a type of system that Musselman has whenever, you bring in a ton of transfer guys. That's the real test, is getting those guys to gel together and learn how to play and just understand the game of basketball and what his system does as a whole.
I just want to clarify something, or maybe you meant this, but you meant a top 16 seed, right?
Are you talking to me, David?
Yeah, I was, Caleb. Yeah, because you said Arkansas could be a top 4 seed. So I just want to clarify, you meant top 16, right? Or do you think they could be a 1 seed this year?
I'm going to go with that top 16, okay. 1 through a 4 seed in the conference.
I just wanted to clarify. It's that is a different level of expectation right there, Caleb.
Let's go for the top.
Let's go for it.
Hey, that's the kind of answers we like to hear around here as Hogs fans. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the roster for this Arkansas team, but let's dive a little deeper and start kind of with our players to watch for the season this year for the Hogs. Caleb, do you want to start us off and tell us who you're going to keep your eye on this year?
Yeah, so when I start looking down through this roster, there's a lot of guys to choose from, talent standpoint, experience standpoint. But a guy I'm going to watch is L. Ellis. I think he has the chance to come in and be a really key piece to this offense. He struggled a little bit at Louisville last year, but rightfully so, where he was the guy that had to do it all, and rightfully so. You're going to struggle when all that pressure is put on you. But when you come into a system here with Coach Musselman that has a lot of other key players and shooters, like you got, like we just mentioned, Khalif Battle, you've got guys like Devo Davis, you've got guys like Layden Blocker that are going to be here to help take some of that pressure off, where he doesn't have to do it all. And I think he could come in and thrive in the system and be a really great floor general, but also a scoring guard that can also slash to the basket in typical true Musselman fashion.
Love the pick. L. Ellis is just a fun player. He's the one that I think when we look at the backcourt, that I think he gets overlooked at times, but he was an all ACC honorable mention last season. Very talented basketball player. I think we talked about him a little bit when we did our transfer episode. My player to watch is Layden Blocker, 4-star talent for the Hogs, lightning quick, very capable defender. He might be the best defensive freshman coming into the SEC this season. He's very capable of running the point as well as a facilitator and a downhill driver. Big reason I want to watch him this year is to see how he's capable when he's put on the floor or trying to get through this roster with so much experience in this backcourt. A lot of depth in there, but I think Layden is capable of getting out there and making a contribution to this team. You got speed and you got talent. Coaches want to put you on the floor. And in my very, very humble, not Eric Musselman opinion.
All right. Well, a player that I think is going to be on everybody's social media feed this season is going to be Chandler Lawson. I mean, he played a significant role over at Memphis, and I think with this coaching staff and cast of teammates, it may really help him tap into his potential. We saw a lot of growth in Chandler Lawson in his transition from Oregon to Memphis, so I can only imagine the progress that we're going to see him experience this year. The only real roadblock I see for Lawson this season is going to be the depth at the forward position. As a Razorback fan, it's a great asset for the team, but I think Lawson is going to have to compete a little bit for some minutes.
Yeah, those are definitely a lot of players to watch. The Chandler Lawson pick is interesting, like you said, to that depth standpoint, with guys coming back like Brazil, Jalen Graham, the Makai Mitchell, and, all these guys that had decent minutes last year. And, I think it could be interesting from a depth standpoint and, keep guys fresh legs. That's going to be really key if we want to have some success this season, is keeping those fresh legs. Like we said, Musselman doesn't rotate a ton, but I could see in some scenarios, you have the A and B team where you can keep fresh legs and the talent is there to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, Maddie. The reason we left that little blank space there is I was pulling up some notes. I wanted to touch on Chandler Lawson here, and I couldn't remember what I wrote down. Chandler Lawson, fantastic piece for Razorbacks. You're talking about someone who's a combo forward, which is just one of those positions you don't typically hear about, but he has the ability to be swung into different spots in that front court. He's going to have the ability to go out there, give Trevin Brazil a break. He's going to have the ability to go out there and give Jeremiah Davenport a break. Several guys in this front court, help them out depending on the situation. I really like Chandler Lawson as a depth piece for the Razorbacks, and I think he's going to be a ton of fun. Caleb, you're spot on. I agree with you. The depth is just amazing to look at on this Razorback team. I can't wait when we start getting to the backcourt later on when we talk about that depth. But I'm sure we'll get to it in a little bit.
We touched on it a little bit there. Talking about Lawson, talking about Brazil, talking about Davenport, a stacked front court for the Hogs this season. So let's take a deeper look. And, Caleb, when you look at this front court, what do you see this season for the Hogs?
I think you see the chance to see a lot of exciting basketball, a lot of explosive plays, and I think of a lot of scoring. We know what Trevor Brazil can do when he's healthy. He can score from inside out, and that's what makes him a great player all around. But the guy that I'm interested to see how much improvement we've seen is Jalen Graham. We saw glimpses and flashes of what he could be last year as a really prolific scorer, and that hook shot is, you can't stop it. So I'm interested to see how much playing time he comes in this year. Does he improve his defense? And most of all, does he improve his free throw percentage? Because that was absolutely terrible last year. And we know one thing about if you're going to play for Muss, you've got to be able to hit your free throws. So I think if we see improvements in his free throw shooting and defense, I think you could see a lot more of Jalen Graham this year, and maybe in a starting role, but also I think more than likely in a depth kind of off the bench type of role that could, be very beneficial for Arkansas when you have guys like Brazil and Makai Mitchell that need a break, and he could possibly work his way up into that starting role. I think the potential is there, but we'll have to see how his development has been this offseason.
I love the talk about Jalen Graham. I think that's one of my biggest questions in the front court situation for the Razorbacks, is because there's so many dominant bigs out there across this conference. We've talked about Tolu Smith. We've talked about Janai Broom on this show like crazy. There's amazing fours. Alabama's getting Grant Nelson coming in. So the 5 spot was one that I just kept circling for Arkansas as my question mark in the front court. Yeah, I'm with you. Jalen Graham is going to be a player that I definitely am curious to look at. And seeing how far he's come in year 2, because we saw it in the Florida game. He was great in that Florida basketball game. But the issue there is that Colin Castleton was out. So, there was an opportunity for him to go out there and be a big dominant guy. So we need to see that next step up to where he can do that with other bigs on the floor. And I'm hoping that he gets the opportunity and we get to see how much he stepped up. With you on Trevor Brazile, my God, this guy is the stretch four of everyone's dreams. Brazile already projected to be a USA Today first rounder, as we mentioned. Brazile played 27 minutes a game in 9 games for the Razorbacks, and he averaged 11.8 points, 6 rebounds a night, and he was shooting 38% from 3. It's fantastic. Other players also in this front court that you need to take a look at are just like Cincinnati transfer Jeremiah Davenport. He's probably the only guy who can be classified as a true small forward on this Razorback team, but he's very talented. Already mentioned Chandler Lawson and his ability to go out there and help everybody out, and play different spots in the forward position, with his combo ability. But you're exactly right, Caleb. Looking at that 5 spot, big point of conversation for the Razorbacks this year.
Speaking of stats, David, for Trevor Brazile through those first 9 games, what could you say his average of, ESPN top 10 plays were through those 9 games?
I don't think that's a stat anybody's necessarily keeping up with, but we know like in those 9 games, he had probably the dunk of the year. So, that guy is still coming back from the shadow realm from South Dakota State. So, that was insane. And I look forward to watching some more, highlights. Well, I don't know what we're going to see in the Bahamas, but, it'll be nuts going through this season and watching what he's capable of with the full year under his belt.
Listen, I've been hanging on to something that Caleb said since it came out of his mouth. And if anybody is watching right now that watched last season, I will pull my hair out if I
was waiting for it.
Go under 80% from the free throw line. I think it is absolutely ludicrous that someone can get paid to play basketball and miss free throws. So, listen, if there is one thing our bigs need to do this season is actually get to the free throw line and convert. That's all I'm going to say. That's what I want to see. If they do terrible down low, fine. But get fouled. Make your point there. That's what I want.
There's Maddie's spiel on free throws. It's been a long time coming, but we finally got Maddie talking about free throws again.
All right, guys. So dove into the front court pretty heavy there. Moving into what is probably the spot David's most excited about. I think he's been patiently waiting over there to talk about the backcourt for this Hogs team. Deep, experienced. You've got Mark, you've got Davis, you've got Battle, Ellis, and Blocker all looking to get out on the floor and make a big impact for this team. Caleb, it's a long laundry list of names and a lot of minutes to be given out. So what are you thinking here for this backcourt on the Hogs?
Hey, I'll take having a depth list like that. And, all I got to say is, good luck for any offenses that run their offense through their backcourt, because with guys like Mark, Davis, Blocker, Battle, these guys like this, good luck getting anything to go through. They're going to be tremendous on the defensive side of the ball. Just locked down defender. You got Devo Davis coming back. You know what he does. A tremendous ball defender, hounds the ball, will be really good at getting steals. He's just an absolute monster on the defensive side of the court. And then you bring in a guy like Tremont Mark, who was rated very high at Houston and has played at high level winning basketball, making it a deep run in the tournament last year with Houston. And we bring all of his experience to this team that he can, help all these young players understand. And then you've got a guy coming in with Layden Blocker, who is one of the top rated defensive freshmen coming in. So I think, with that combination, plus you got guys like Battle and L. Ellis as well, this is a stacked backcourt that, I think it's probably one of the deepest ones we've seen in a long time here at Arkansas.
I'm love it. Love this backcourt. I'm in love. I think it has the potential to be the best backcourt in the SEC this year. Right now, I know we did our episode on our top 5 backcourts. I had Tennessee number 1, but I did say Arkansas has the potential to be the best. They're so deep. It's so deep. It's so good. Caleb, I want to throw this out there. When Baylor won a national championship in 2021, one of the things that they had was wave after wave of good, experienced, talented guard play. What does Arkansas have this year in the backcourt? Good, experienced, talented guard play.
Exactly.
I mean, it's there. Like you saw it. You saw it firsthand in the Elite Eight back in 2021, and now Arkansas has built something that's kind of similar. And you're exactly right. I don't know what backcourts are keeping up with the Razorbacks on, when they're on defense. The Hogs aren't going to lose because of their defense. It's going to be a little bit on offense. That's where it's going to be at. But you have guys who can contribute in the offense in different ways. You got L. Ellis out there who averaged 17.7 points per game. Tremendous player. He was the third most in the conference last season there at Louisville for the Cardinals in the ACC. And then you got Traymar Mark. We've already talked about his defense and what he's bringing from an aspect of a winning culture. But the other side of a Traymar Mark, he's an excellent ISO player. He's willing to get his shot off, and he will get his shot off when he's in isolation, and he's willing to put himself there time and time again. And then Khalif Battle, I've only been saying this, I don't know how much this offseason, but averaged 17.9 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.8 assists, and he made those with splits from 41%, 35%, and 89.8% from the free throw line. And by the way, in the 27 games he played, he came off the bench in 19 of those. What's it like if he's a starter out there? And then, like he's mentioned, Layden Blocker. I mean, dynamic, open floor, has tremendous end-to-end speed. And like I've heard a couple of guys talking about it. He's kind of a skinny Ricky Council is how they've framed him over and over again. So it's going to be an exciting backcourt for the Razorbacks. And this is one of the things that I think pushes Arkansas well past their Bart Torvik ranking at 28th. And I think that's where they're kind of misunderstanding this Razorback team, because you're not going to have a tire guy out there. And when you do, you're going to have someone who can stick right into the game because it's that deep and not lose that much production at all.
Definitely. I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head there. Talking about the expanse of Musselman's backcourt this year. So we've talked about the front court. We've talked about the backcourt. Let's put them together and play some basketball. Let's look over the schedule real quick. Really looks like an Eric Musselman special again. You've got some strong mid-majors mixed with your MTE and a really fun section of play in between UNC Greensboro to none other than the future SEC school, the Oklahoma Sooners. So we'll jump in here. Get the season started with a game against Alcorn State on November 6th. The Braves finished second in the SWAC last season. I think we can all expect an Arkansas win here, but do you guys think this is a good first test for the Hogs?
I think this will be a good test for the Hogs just to see how this team comes out and is able to play together and, get their continuity together and, just figure out the flow where everybody's going to be timing. That's all these first games are really about, is trying to figure out how you all work together and how fast you can, really figure that out. And I think the question for this game is, not do the Hogs win, but by how much.
I agree with you there. It's definitely a how much question, but I appreciate the fact that you're putting somebody who looks like they have a chance to win their conference in the first game of the season. Yeah, that's going to get you a little bit more experience down the road, and it's also going to help the net a little bit. Sure, it'll end up being probably a Q3 win at the end of the day, but when you start collecting good upper class Q3 wins, it does help your net. And that's been the Eric Musselman system for a long time. You just can't lose those games. That's the secret behind the message there. But I think it's a great first test. Definitely want to play mid-majors who are going to be at the upper end to help your resume down the stretch.
For sure. Speaking of those games that help us in the net, last year Arkansas played the champion of the Big South in UNC Asheville, and this year they're playing Gardner-Webb from the Big South. Then they got Old Dominion, who finished 5th in the Sun Belt last year. Do you guys see any bumps in the road for the Hogs here?
I'm not really stressing this part. Yeah, I think this will be comfortable enough. Caleb?
Yeah, same. I think these are just games that, will really help this team just get their feet under them and, get ready for once we dive into some of these higher level non-conference games and get them ready for those tests upcoming.
Yeah, there's mid-majors I'm scared of. Those aren't them.
Definitely. I think these games are meant to kind of be confidence boosters, some chemistry builders. But the thing that does worry me about the Razorbacks, we see it time and time again, they tend to play to the level of opponent that they're playing. And that's my only roadblock here for the Hogs, is hopefully they can get out and play like the team that they're going to be looking like in March, rather than the team we usually see them look like in October, November.
It's not December yet. It's not December. But go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. After that, we start the stretch of games that starts to look a little bit interesting. We've got UNC Greensboro first, team that finished third in the SoCon last year and has been one of the best teams in the SoCon the last several seasons. What are your thoughts here, guys?
Yeah, so on this one, I think it's another one of those games that, it depends, like you said. Does Arkansas play the level of their competition, or do they play like we know that they will be able to? And I think this is another game that it might start off close early, but I think Arkansas ultimately runs away with it in the end and is, that final tune-up game before we jump into some tournament play.
I expect this is why, like, when we were talking about this, UNC Greensboro is that first step up in competition level from what you've been playing at. UNC Greensboro is a good mid-major program, and they're in the SoCon. They've been consistently at the top of that conference. They recruit well. They build good teams. So I think what Eric Musselman is seeing here is, again, a team that you can put on your resume that's going to be toward the top of their conference, and a team that's going to win basketball games. But it's also a test for your team to take these gradual steps before you go on to play bigger competition, because there's some huge games about to turn the corner here. And like UNC Greensboro is a team that you want to get them a little bit of a bigger challenge in. Of course, last year also in this game, Trevor Brazil, this was the game that he lost. He had his injury in, and the Razorbacks ended up losing him for the season. There's nothing really anything to merit at that other than just an interesting point to point out. But I think UNC Greensboro is the first game in which Arkansas will be taking a somewhat bigger step in competition.
All right. Hopefully up to this point, the Hogs have had time to build some of that chemistry and camaraderie as a team and get a little bit of confidence under their belt before they head down to the Bahamas for Battle for Atlantis. Opening game is going to be against Stanford. Their second game will either be against Memphis or Michigan. And if they make it to the final game, they will either be facing North Carolina, Northern Iowa, Villanova, or Texas Tech. What are your thoughts here on the Hogs MTE, guys?
Yeah, for sure. This is a tournament where you definitely see that talent level ramp up. You jump into Power 5 schools now where, we've seen all of these teams at some point be good in basketball and have really good programs. So I think this is a chance for Arkansas that realistically could make it to the finals of this tournament. We saw them have a really good run last year down in Hawaii, against some stiff competition down there as well. So I think this is another tournament that will really test the Hogs, but ultimately could also be good for this team as, they really start to come out and, show what they're about.
Yeah, John Runstein pointed out that this is one of the MTEs that he's the most excited about coming in November. But this is a tournament Arkansas can win. We talked about it earlier in the show, not this episode, but in the prior episodes about like the relationship between the MTEs and the national champions. There's no reason to, just because you win your MTE, you're going to win the national championship. But what we've seen is that so many teams who have won their MTE are the ones who have gone on to win the national championship. So though that's where that mix is at. This is an interesting tournament. Stanford, I'm not too worried about for the Hogs. Stanford is not to that level. But the second game, Michigan, you don't know exactly what you're going to get out of Michigan and Howard. We also hope Howard has a speedy recovery back from his from the surgery that he had. But for Memphis, that's a good basketball team. Memphis is a good basketball team. And I'm not hoping simply because the people of Northeast Arkansas really want this game. I'm hoping because that's going to just be a great renewal of that rivalry, period, if that is the game. But Memphis is a good basketball team. They've got Javon Quinterly, who came from Alabama, transferred to Memphis this offseason. Really quality opponent. On the other side of the bracket, you're looking at North Carolina, who is one of the biggest letdowns of this. There's not one of the biggest letdown of the season last year. Just a horrible team. But, compared to their expectations. But North Carolina is going to be looking to turn that corner. They're probably the favorite on that side of the bracket. And then you got Villanova and Texas Tech. Texas Tech building themselves up right now. Villanova had a rough season last year, but that is a perennial team that you expect to be a decent opponent coming out of the Big East. But don't sleep on Northern Iowa. That is one of the mid-majors that I've been looking at this offseason as a team that might be able to do some damage. They're in this tournament for a reason, and they could be an equation breaker out there in the Bahamas. They could upset some teams. They could change the format quite a bit. So keep an eye on what Northern Iowa's doing. Don't say mid-major and fall asleep. That's a team that can do some damage. Pay attention to them because we'll probably see them in the NCAA tournament this year.
Definitely. Well, hopefully these guys will have a little bit of R&R time in between these difficult tests in the MTE, because then they have to come back home to Arkansas and play probably the biggest game in Bud Walton since the 1991 matchup against UNLV. The Duke Blue Devils come to Bud as part of the ACC-SEC Challenge. Both teams are likely to be in the AP Top 25, so we could see a solid Top 25 matchup here. All right, guys, here we go. What are your thoughts on Duke coming to Fayetteville?
Yeah, this is a game that I've had circled since it was announced. Not only is, there's history between the two programs. We played them a few years ago in the NCAA tournament, but then we also had, as you mentioned, we had a big win over them, in Arkansas's national title. That's one of the biggest memories a lot of Arkansas fans have, especially the older generation, is of the shot. Scotty Thurman for the win over Duke. So I think this is probably, like you said, the biggest game that could come to Bud Walton this season, and rightfully so. And not to mention, it's also the 30th year anniversary of the championship. So, this could be a big game for Arkansas, not only for game purposes, but also, that rivalry and, potential recruiting purposes as well.
I'm going to talk about the unsung rivalry in this game. And that's between Jay Bilas and Hunter Yurachek. Those two just have not been getting along lately. But, on the other side of actual basketball here, let's talk about the fact that the Duke Blue Devils, Kyle Filikowski, the dude could have gone to the NBA last year, and he's going to be anchoring down the front court for the Devils. The Blue Devils are just a really, really good team. It's going to be a heck of a matchup in that game. You got Jeremiah Roach, 13.6 points per game. Therese Proctor, 9.4 points per game. Then you got Jared McCain, who's going to be on this team. He was number 12 in the ESPN Top 100 players and freshman coming into the season. It's a stellar Duke team, but let's not forget that this game is in Bud Walton Arena. Gary Parrish already noted out that this is probably a game that the Duke Blue Devils might lose in. There's a real possibility in that game. And Arkansas and Duke this could be a top 10 matchup, not just top 25, depending on the outcome there in the Bahamas. So there's a lot to be excited about for this game. And also, Duke doesn't venture much outside of neutral sites and Cameron indoors during their non-conference schedule. So to be sent to Bud Walton is just a crazy situation for Duke to be sent to. Very exciting game. One I'm thrilled for, and would do horrible things for a set of tickets to that game. So, I'm excited. That's going to be a great basketball game.
Yeah, like David said, once this game was announced, we talked about the awful things that we would do just to get tickets to this game. Selling our souls was on the short list for sure. But, they, like he said, they have to play at Bud Walton. And I think that's going to be the determining factor here. We look at these teams and you take the law of averages. You've got a player for Arkansas to cancel out a player for Duke. And then what you have left is going to be the atmosphere at Bud Walton. So I know there's going to be many fans like us trying to sell their souls for tickets. So we know it's going to be rocking at the Bud. All right, going down the list after the craziness of the Duke Blue Devils in Fayetteville, the Hogs get another home game against a team that David is kind of in love with as a mid-major in the Furman Paladins. They're last year's SoCon champions, a team that beat a 4 seed in Virginia in March Madness, a team you said would be a big mid-major to watch last year. Guys, what are your thoughts on Furman?
Yeah, this is a team that, was really talented last year. Like you mentioned, they won their conference, came in, knocked off a 4 seed in the tournament. I mean, you can't ask for more than that as a mid-major school to have that type of success. And, I think this is another good test for Arkansas, against an opponent you don't want to go in and sleep against, especially say you do come out with a victory in that Duke game. You're going to be ecstatic, and that's going to be a big, huge win for this team. So you can't let that get in the way if that does happen. Or even if we don't win that game, you still can't sleep on a school like this, or you'll take the harsh reality and a loss with that one.
Yeah, Furman, Bob Ritchie coming into his 7th season with the Paladins, had a great year last year, making the round of 32 and making that buzzer beater shot to beat Virginia, a team that's just really darn good. And I expect to be very competitive again in the SoCon. I think there's a reason Eric Musselman is scheduling this team, because as you mentioned at the beginning of this segment, Maddie, you're scheduling teams that are going to help your resume. And this is one of those teams that could possibly win the SoCon again this year. So like Caleb said, Caleb had the point that I really wanted to hammer home. You cannot be sleepwalking or be, tough game drunk or whatever you want to call it after coming back from the Bahamas and playing Duke. That's just way too much you got to take this game seriously, because that is a serious opponent. So I hope the crowd's ready for it and they don't sleep on it either, because Bud Walton might be needed a little bit of assistance to pull some guys who might be a little fatigued, in that game. So that's one to pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. Duke is going to be a tough game for the Hogs. So we definitely don't want to see a hangover game there. In Furman, like you said, they were a fantastic team last season, going to be a great team this season again. So, I think they definitely have to focus up, even though it is coming off of a hard game. Definitely not one to take lightly. So we're going to finish up with the final game in a super fun stretch for Arkansas season against Oklahoma in the Crimson and Cardinal Classic. What are y'all's thoughts on the Hogs going to what we aptly like to call it Bud Walton West at the BOK Center in Tulsa?
Yeah, I think this has the chance to be another great game. We've seen great matchups in the past 2 years. 2 years ago, the game that was super close, you saw Musselman get thrown out of. Last year, Arkansas comes back and has another great game. And then so I think this has just been a great game in Tulsa that, where he could be in store for another one this year.
Yeah, all-time Arkansas leads the series against Oklahoma. But you're right. A couple of years ago there in the BOK Center, Oklahoma made the upset, and it really was a surprising win for Oklahoma. And Eric Musselman, I watched him from moment 1 to moment 0 getting thrown out of that game. And he was frustrated in that one. But I do think Arkansas is the more talented team here. And I do think that they're going to wrap this up before facing Oklahoma consistently as a conference opponent in the future. But I do think that Hogs have a chance to take a W here and win this game against the Sooners. Big thing for me is in this game, how good is Oklahoma going to be this year? Because as a neutral site opponent, this could either be a quad 1 or quad 2 game, depending on how the Sooners perform in the Big 12.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a point in time where Arkansas should lose to Oklahoma, maybe the Kelvin Sampson series, but for the most part, I think we see Eric Musselman get a win here, especially considering Hog fans will travel and, it's not too far from Tulsa. So I think we're going to see a lot of Hogs there and feel the home crowd support out on the court for that one. All right, closing out non-conference here with a game in Little Rock against Lipscomb and 2 games in Fayetteville against Abilene Christian and UNC Wilmington. Do you guys see any possible roadblocks here for the Hogs?
I would typically say no, but you look back at last year and what happened in Little Rock last year. You can't forget that. And this is another scenario where, it seems like there's something about Little Rock and Razorback sporting teams that do not mix together. As much as it's great for the fans to get to see the Hogs, it usually never goes well. Or if we do get a victory, there's some outcome, something with a player, something that is not good for the Razorbacks. So this is a game that you can't really overlook, in my opinion. And hopefully Arkansas goes down there and, takes care of business and comes back home healthy and with a win.
Yeah, it's just the Little Rock curse at the end of the day. Yeah, that's where Nick Smith Jr. got pulled out of the game last year. And yeah, that kind of derailed his season just a little bit for the Hogs. But yeah, anytime the Hogs go down to Little Rock, I'm worried about something. The year before that, Hofstra was a little bit of a question mark going down there. But you know what is just going to be the nice thing about this game? It's not going to be on TV more than likely, is how that goes at Simmons. And that's going to be a great day of basketball across the conference. Lipscomb and Arkansas is not the highlight reel of the weekend. So put that on with Chuck Barrett. Listen to it in the background while you're watching probably a ton of other really great basketball games on your TV throughout that Saturday. Not too worried about Abilene Christian or UNC Wilmington. I don't think there's any bumps there. But yeah, I'll be sweating it out in Little Rock listening to the radio broadcast.
Okay, let's pull out the crystal balls here. My prediction for the Hogs over the non-conference, I've got them at 11.5. What do you guys think? Over or under that win total?
Just with the optimism that this team has, I'm going to go with the over. I really think this team could be something special for Arkansas. You know, there might be a bump or two in the road, but if Musselman gets this team to gel together and be very sound defensively like we know it can be, I think that's 100% possible.
I am also going to go with the over. I like 12. 12 is the number that I've got stuck in my head for this. I don't know exactly where the loss is going to be, whether it happens in the Bahamas or it happens against Duke. But like that would be my thought process. But this is a very talented team and one that I think Arkansas can come out of non-conference play with 12 games won underneath their belt.
Definitely. So set up for success with you guys thinking 12 wins. We'll jump into the conference schedule. Looking over it, we've got Georgia twice, Kentucky twice, LSU twice, Texas A&M twice, Mizzou twice. Then we've got Tennessee at home, Alabama and Florida on the road, and both Mississippi schools on the road. Vandy and South Carolina both at home, which is not going to be great for our net, but hopefully add a W to the win column. So, guys, just talking over this, what are your thoughts on the SEC schedule?
I think it's another great slate of games throughout this, the season. You've got the almost built in now Arkansas-Kentucky rivalry where we played them twice the past, this year will be the third year in a row that we played them twice in a season. We went into Rupp last year, got the win. Then they came into Fayetteville and got the win last year. So, I think this is a series that could be another big one this year, to see what this experienced Musselman team does against a quite, Kentucky team to me that maybe has a little bit of a question mark going into the season on, what you can expect from them. And then, all these other games, a series that I want us to sweep this season is Missouri. That's a game that shouldn't be close, but it seems to always be close. And I think it's a game that, could be, a very high game for Arkansas just because Missouri is starting to build something up in Columbia. So it could be a good schedule building and, weighted victory for Arkansas if we can get the sweep here against these opponents.
Yeah, I think Kentucky is an interesting situation. You got some really great young talent in Kentucky, but them having to come to Bud is going to be a stressful game. I can see that series being a split at Rupp and then at Bud. Respectively, the home team wins in both of those games would be my thinking. That's kind of how I'm feeling out the Kentucky series. Texas A&M, and to me, is going to be an interesting one. That's another super experienced team. Not enough people are talking about Texas A&M. That is a team that's trying to figure out how to win this conference this year. Maddie, I know you pointed out Vandy and South Carolina on the road. Woo, you can't lose those games. With those being at home, you cannot lose those games. That is good old quality poison for your resume. It's bad for your season if you lost those games, especially if I think what I'm thinking with South Carolina this season is I think they'll probably end up being the bottom team in the SEC. So I am definitely a little bit worried. You cannot lose those games. Like that's imperative. And then on the Mississippi schools, just want to touch on those real fast. Basketball could be big. Playing both of those on the road. There could be a loss coming in there somewhere. A little bit of nervous on that one, but I do think overall Arkansas does very well in their conference schedule.
Yeah, I think looking over this, my kind of exclamation marks, more so worried games, I guess you'll say. Like David mentioned, Texas A&M going to be great this year. I think that's a series that we split that some people may not be expecting us to. Mizzou, mainly because it's hard to go in there and win. They have a great home atmosphere, much like Bud Walton. And then, like David said, both Mississippi schools. I think Ole Miss, depending on who's playing, once we figure that out.
Yeah.
And Mississippi State is going to be a force to be reckoned with this season. So those games are definitely ones that I'm going to keep circled on my calendar to keep an eye on, and maybe have to have a drink before to calm my nerves. All right. So going through that, how many wins are you guys thinking for the Hogs? I've got the win total set at 22.5 for the season. Are we going over or under here?
I think I'm going to take the optimistic over here it goes back to if this Musselman team can do what's expected out of them, that shouldn't be a problem. And I think you see this team top 3, potentially winning the SEC this season. I think that potential is there. So I'm going to go the optimistic there and say the over.
I'm also going to hit the over on this one, and I'm thinking 24 is where Arkansas ends up this season. I think this is a great Razorback team, and I don't think there's a ton of backcourts out there that can keep up with Arkansas's backcourt, and the defense is going to be stellar, and that's the one thing that always seems to travel. It's hard to win college basketball games on the road, but defense travels, and that's what helps you win basketball games, and I think the Hogs got that. There's some tough games in there. There's some sneaky ones, but I'm sitting at 24 is what I'm thinking for the Razorbacks.
All right. So something as Arkansas fans seem to always struggle with here. Let's take a look at expectations. Going into the Hogs season, what are we thinking for the floor and what's the ceiling for this Hogs team? Caleb, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think the floor for this team, for me, it's easy to determine that the floor is going to be making the tournament. I think that with what Muss has been able to do here, that should be the floor for this Arkansas team is, to have, that low to mid 20 win mark and make the tournament. Ceiling wise, I could see this team, potential making it to the Final Four. This is a very experienced team that, if Musselman gets this right, coaches these guys up right, like we know he can, that could be very possible for this Razorback team this year.
I think the floor, like Caleb said, is making the NCAA tournament 20 wins. Eric Musselman has not had a season where he's been below 20 wins his entire time at Arkansas. He's been consistently there, even in year one where he had Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe for his team, and he was still trying to build something at the very beginning at Arkansas. That team still won 20 games. It may have not felt like it at times, but they definitely did. And then, when you look at this team making the NCAA tournament, it's an absolute expectation. You have to do it every year. That is the standard at Arkansas for just a decent season. And I think that's definitely there. For a floor, as far as a seed, I'm thinking 8-9. Now, let's talk about the ceiling. It's astronomical. That's the crazy thing. You can sleep on the Hogs all you want to. But I really think this backcourt's insane. I think there's so many talents at the 3 and 4 spots that you're going to be ready to go for this season. And there's so much experience. You're talking about 35 years worth of experience collectively on this team. It's nuts. And as I've talked about, the statistics suggest that experience is the thing that's winning basketball games in the NCAA tournament. We've seen the number of true freshmen and freshmen drop in March in the Final Four every season. It's below 2 freshmen now, as far as how it's going. So this is an experienced SEC team. This is an experienced Arkansas team. It is one that can absolutely do some damage throughout this year. The Final Four is the ceiling. The Final Four is absolutely the ceiling. Maybe a little bit more. But it's hard to say that past the Final Four. When you get to the Final Four, it's who's in there with me, really. So that's part of what makes that determination. So I think the ceiling's Final Four. It's a run, as we pointed out earlier this season. Arkansas was picked 9th by Vegas's insider composite there between all the sports book. The odds favor Arkansas as the 9th best odds to win the national championship. There's a lot of teams who can do it. So I definitely think that's the ceiling for the Hogs.
All right, going with my picks, I think the floor, we're looking at somewhere in the top 7 of the SEC, making an NCAA run somewhere between, I would say, a 6 and 8 seed. And the ceiling, like David said, is astronomical. With this talent, with this experience on this team, I could definitely see Muss making a Final Four run here with an excellent backcourt, a sneaky front court. I think it's going to happen. And, Coach Musselman and what he's built here and his coaching staff that he's built up around him, I think the possibilities are endless. And I do think we hang a Final Four banner for the year if the Hogs play to their potential. All right. So, guys, kind of wrapping up here. We've talked about this team a lot. We've talked about the players. We've talked about coaches. We've talked about the schedule. What are your final thoughts when we put it all together for this team?
Yeah, I think this could be an exciting year for Arkansas basketball. We've known what we're getting out of Coach Musselman, and it seems like every year he's very consistent, is getting us there. And I think it's just a matter of time. I think we've said before, he's got a window here where he has the realistic chances with what he can do with transfer portals and recruiting those high talent freshmen to make it to a championship game. I think it's not a matter of if, but when. I think Musselman's that great of a coach that we could see that this year. The talent for this team is there. And we know Musselman's a heck of a coach and can get a lot out of his guys. And I think if he does it, you could possibly see expectations like that this season.
It's experience and talent. That's what Arkansas brings to the table this year. It's experience and talent. This backcourt is thrilling. Like I said, I'm in love with what's been done. Wave after wave of talented guard. I don't know how the majority of backcourts in this conference are going to keep up with them. They can attack you in a variety of different ways. It's scary. And no matter what, at the end of the day, I trust Eric Musselman to get the job done. He's been consistent at Arkansas, even in a down year last year where this team ended up in the Sweet 16. And that was going through injuries, reworking your offense, and everything else in between. Then you got some great talent out there like Trevor Brazile, who's going to be a big highlight in this team. The schedule kind of stinks in some ways, but you got to understand, like, they can get through this. They can get through those rough patches, but there's some great opportunities for some wins out there. You got Atlantis, you got Kentucky, you got Tennessee, you got Texas A&M at home. There's a lot of chances to build that net ranking. So I can see Arkansas finishing as a top four in the SEC this season and being a top 16 seed in the tournament. There's a lot of reasons to like this team.
Yeah, I see this team going places for sure with development opportunities and the new players and the transfer players. I think it's a base that fits Musselman's system very well. And with the returning talent we'll have on the floor, like I said, I think we see this team making at least an Elite Eight run, if not something more. And we've talked about depth. We've talked about it quite a bit. I think we're going to see a little bit of a throwback here to Nolan's 40 minutes of hell, because that's what we're going to give them with fresh legs on and off the court. And not a whole lot of teams are going to be able to keep up with that. I think they're going to regain some confidence in the SEC and finish higher than they did last season, putting themselves in a better position when it comes time to get into tournament talk. If you watched our front and backcourt videos, me and David are both ecstatic about this backcourt. And I think our front court, like I said, is sneaky this season and going to do a little bit of damage. So I think it's going to make it to where the Hogs put up a fight for any team to try and come in and still win from the Hogs this year. All right, guys, we want to thank Caleb so much for coming on to talk about the Hogs with us today. Caleb, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can go check us out and find us on YouTube, Woopig Weekly. We release episodes weekly, where we talk about all things Arkansas going on. Right now it's football season, so we got a lot to talk about with this Arkansas football team. We've got basketball starting up soon in the next coming months. A lot of content we're generating out. We're slowly getting, Hog Talk segments we've done in the past added to our YouTube channel that we got started up. So all the Hog content you want, go check it out. We also have podcasts that is, if you don't want to watch YouTube, we've got it on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you can find your podcast. So just go search Woopig Weekly and you can find us right there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again, Caleb. And thank you guys so much for watching. Next, we're going to preview the Auburn Tigers with the guys from the Up Tempo podcast on Thursday. You're not going to want to miss that one. So make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We are talking more SEC basketball every week. So make sure you tune in. Thanks, guys.